Roman Travers on Magic Talk.
Tanya Unkovich is a wonderfully kind person. She's also an elite transformation specialist and life coach and a good friend at the Sunday Cafe. What a glorious day, Tanya.
Isn't it fantastic? The perfect fishing day, right?
Yeah, I know. And the thing is, you skippity hoppity, skip, lick your ice cream, having a great time, and then you realise that there are people around you suffering all the time, and you don't know that. But grief is what we're going to talk about today. How would you describe what grief is?
Oh, look, it's like a fingerprint. It is different for every single one of us, and we all respond to it very different, and we're all triggered very differently, and quite often we don't even know that we're grieving, and that's the big thing. We just think we're in a bad mood or we're down or something, but we don't realise that underneath it is probably grief. And it doesn't necessarily need to be the passing of someone. We grieve for all sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Separation, divorce, it's a loss of a different kind, isn't it?
Absolutely. Loss of a pet even.
There's a story that I know that you know all about, the passing of John Travolta's wife with cancer. How did he cope?
Well, actually, I'm following him. And, being a celebrity, they're all very quiet often, aren't they? And it's about month 4 for John now, and I'm noticing that slowly he's starting to post a little bit more on Instagram and just share how he is now coming out of that haze and living. And that's often what happens around that 3 or 4 month mark. Everyone else who's been around you during that time, that intense time, has gone back to their normal lives, right? And you all of a sudden are left on your own, often on your own anyway. And you're going, oh my God, is this my new normal? And then it really hits you that actually this is the remainder of your life. And it's a really, really tough time, because that is when often the grief hits you the worst. You're like, oh goodness, this really did happen.
Yeah, exactly. We're wired to expect this kind of loss. We know it's going to happen, but it's quite different when you're confronted with it. This year I've lost 2 aunts in their 90s and an uncle as well. They had great lives, but they're gone now. What does it mean? What have you seen this year when we're unable to pop along to gatherings? It's been a very different year with the levels of lockdown, hasn't it?
Oh, really, it has. And, there's a lot of people who are really suffering right now. And they're suffering because they still haven't really felt that they've been able to grieve the way we normally grieve, in inverted commas. Have the funeral, the end-of-life celebration, whatever it is. And there seems to be a gap for them. And it's now that they're going, it just feels complicated. It complicates the grief a little bit more. You feel, some people are angry even, they don't know what to do with the anger. But, often when we dig deeper, underneath that anger is just pure sadness and even more intensified loss. And, that's why I like to talk about it now, because there's a lot of people who have not only lost loved ones, but they've actually lost their jobs as well. They've lost life as they once knew it, or they've lost businesses. And right now, as Christmas is getting closer, they're actually feeling that loss even more. So it's a good time to talk about it and reach out to people who you think they seem on the outside to be coping well, but actually quite often those ones who don't say anything are the ones that are really silently suffering inside.
Yeah, do you think our culture is wired differently? Do you think other cultures, I'm just trying to think of some randomly, that are better at dealing with it? The Maori, for example, here, they have a whole long period. People go to a funeral and they're gone for like a week or so. We pop in and out over a few hours and get back to work and life goes on. How different is it here? What sort of variation do you see?
Well, look, I love the way the Maoris grieve that way, and even my own culture, the Croatians or the Italians, and that we actually make quite an event out of it, and it does go on for a day or two. We might bring our loved ones at home, and I did that. It's just so amazing how it gives you time to actually sit and say goodbye. And, quite often what we do is we want to do everything quickly and rushed and hurried, just so that we don't feel the pain or we don't feel the reality of the loss. But to have that cultural, beautiful ceremony over 2, 3, 4 days, whatever it takes, it's really spectacular. And I've already said to my husband, do that for me, won't you?
Yeah.
Even the they have time to sit with their masters, and I've watched that myself, and it's extraordinary. There's nothing to be afraid of with grief. I think, some cultures do it better than others, and I would encourage anyone to not be afraid to actually really be present with the grief, because actually it'll come back and bite you in some other way later on when you don't properly grieve.
Yeah. Oh, look, having lived rurally, anyone who knows the paradise shell duck will know that when one of their partners gets shot or dies, they just grieve, they squawk and carry on for ages. There are animals that you see dealing with this in their own way as well. What does it mean to get back to normal? And what happens a few months down the road when everyone has gone back to their normal lives?
Well, if you're a spouse, then it's about working out what normal is. It's about going through that time of, well, who am I in the world now? I'm no longer a wife or a husband, a Mr. or a Mrs. What do I call myself? Who am I? And you do have to go through this place of working out who you are in the world. What am I here for? What do I want for the rest of my life? So there's that whole identity area. And then, of course, getting clarity as well. What do I want for the remainder of my life? But once you've actually worked that out, which could take a long period of time, it's also about allowing yourself to step into that, to step into actually joy again, to step into greatness again. And that doesn't mean that the grieving stops. It means that you're allowing yourself to live while the grief still revisits.
Tanya Unkovich with us here, elite transformation specialist and life coach, talking about grief. And it's a really hard topic for a lot of people to really openly talk about. Christmas is just around the corner. These festivities are often reminders of things you don't have anymore, right?
Oh, absolutely. Our loved ones especially. And, even if it's a few years they've gone, we are always reminded. And this is where it's about going, you know what, I'm going to embrace the memory and love the memory and stick with it and be with that memory instead of wanting to run away from it. But it's also a time for those of us who maybe haven't lost anyone this year to think of someone who has lost someone or something, and put yourself out there and go, how can I be of service to someone else this year as a way of giving this Christmas? It doesn't always have to be about presents, right? You can give an act of service this year and reach out to someone who you know is suffering right now, and it may be that they are not well. A lot of people have been diagnosed with really bad illnesses this year, and Christmas isn't going to be the same.
Yeah,
Who can you
it's
reach
true.
out to?
For those that are left and they've got through a grieving period, you're making a presumption they're back to some sort of form of normality. Is it okay to go back to the topic and say to them, do you share memories? Do you bring it up? Do you actively avoid it? What do you do?
Well, follow their lead. Maybe check in with them. Are you okay talking about this? Because they may not want to burden you. Often the person who is left behind, they don't want to, they get to a place where they go, oh, I don't want to keep burdening someone else, and I don't want to keep talking about it and feel like a sad sack. Maybe check in with them and say, do you need someone to offload your burden and to just open up to? Because I'm here. I'm really open and willing to talk with you about your loved one that's just gone. And, that's where it is really helpful to just say, hey, I'm here. And just follow their lead, though. Really, I mean, people do need to be ready to talk, and you can't just syringe it out of them. They need to be ready to.
Yeah, you talk about survivor's guilt, that whole feeling of, when is it okay for me to show the world that I'm happy to laugh again, to be a bit silly and maybe meet someone else. Talk to me about survivor's guilt. What does that mean?
It means feeling really bad that you're here and they're not. It means feeling really bad the first time you laugh again when you go to a movie, the first time you go on your first date, whatever it is after they've gone, the first time you've gone out and bought something really nice for yourself and go, oh my God, they're not here to share this with me and I'm spending our money. There's all sorts of ways that you can indulge in guilt. And, the reason I say that word indulge in guilt is sometimes we do make a bit of a profession out of it, and it's because we don't want to allow ourselves to move forward, or we don't want others to see that we're happy and moving forward. It's about being okay to let go of that grief. It doesn't mean that you will forget them. It doesn't mean that you're bad for moving forward. It just means that you are living again. And that's what they would want for you as well. So it's a good way to turn things around. Life is meant to be lived, and, you know, grief, tragedy strikes us all at some point in our lives, and it's about, well, how am I going to deal with this?
Yeah, just very quickly, we haven't got much more time now, Tanya, sadly, but what should we do as friends and family of those who've experienced death? Are we best to just let them talk about it? Should we just be there for them, sitting in the corner ready for them? What's the best approach?
Well, I would actually check in with them, be bold and go, hey, you may or may not want to hear this, but I'm here for you whenever you need to talk. Do you need to talk right now? No, not right now. Okay, I'll check in with you in a month's time. You know, sometimes we can be a bit playful with it as well.
Yeah, good. Tanya Unkovich, you always make a lot of sense, and you just a lovely, lovely person. Elite transformation specialist and life coach, Tanya Unkovich, and you can find her at tanyaunkovich.com. That's UNKOVICH for the Unkovich part. Yeah, it all makes sense when you know. It's just knowing when to do it, right? Good advice there.